Well, hey, this is Ned LeDoux, and I was born country.
Hey everybody, you're listening to episode number 21 of the Born Country Podcast, and I'm your host, as always, Arthur Bourne. We have a short and sweet interview for you this week as I'm joined by Ned LeDoux, and we get to talking about his latest album, Sagebrush, his father, Chris LeDoux, and the upcoming Chris LeDoux Days festival up in Kaycee, Wyoming. If you happen to be in the surrounding area or traveling up for the event, it sounds like a great time with live country music and a little rodeo action. Now, before we get to Ned, I want to urge once again that you head over to the Born Country Podcast Instagram and Twitter accounts. I'm heading down to Nashville next week for CMA Fest, and I'll be streaming snippets of performances from your favorite country artists of the 90s throughout the week. These live streams will not be on Facebook, so make sure to follow at Born Country Pod on Twitter and at Born Country Podcast on Instagram. Links for both of those accounts will be available at iwasborncountry.com/021. Speaking of iwasborncountry.com, if you haven't visited the show's official website yet, it just recently received a major makeover. It's now even easier to listen to new and past episodes of the Born Country Podcast right there on the website. Give it a look. Now let's get Ned LeDoux on the line, enjoy the interview, and hang around afterwards for a few follow-up notes. Joining me on the Born Country Podcast this week is singer-songwriter Ned LeDoux, of course the son of champion bareback rider and country music legend himself, Chris LeDoux. Welcome to the show, Ned.
Well, thanks for having me on. Yeah.
How you doing? I understand you're out on the road this weekend.
Yeah, I'm starting about a 2.5-week run. So, the summertime is here, and we just kicked it off up in Miles City, Montana for the bucking horse sale. And, yeah, things are getting along pretty good.
Good. Right off the bat, Ned, we're just a few short weeks away from the 8th annual Chris LeDoux Days Festival up in Kaycee, Wyoming. Can you tell us about the event and a little about the history and what fans can expect this year?
Yeah, the whole idea kind of started with, my mom and dad had this lot in Kaycee. And for years, my granddad's store sat there, a store called the Rusty Spur. And then there was a flood that came through Kaycee. I think it was in the year of 2000, and kind of took out the whole south end of Kaycee down the river. And so there, for a long time, there was just a vacant lot. And but my mom and dad always thought it'd be neat to put like a little park in there, maybe put some, picnic tables and, some grills and things like that. So the folks coming off of I-25 that goes right by KC, if they want to break, they can just pull off and just kind of hang out in there and take a breather. But when my dad passed away, this other idea came around, and my mom was talking with this sculptor, Mike Thomas from Buffalo, Wyoming, which in my opinion is probably the best sculptor in the country. And the cool thing is he lives in Buffalo, Wyoming. And so they got to talking about building this sculpture or statue of Dad on his championship ride from 1976 and putting it in this park and building around it. And so we got that all put together, and then we came up with having this annual event called Chris LeDoux Days. And every year it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. We've had guys like Corb Lund, Aaron Watson, Cody Johnson, and we always try to get some local talent, from the KC area. So yeah, it's just a great time. We have a match bronc riding, bareback riding, and it's just a great family event.
You mentioned Corb Lund. I'm a huge fan of Corb, and hopefully we'll have Corb on the show here soon. How long have you known Corb? I seem to recall that you two have been touring around for quite a while together.
Yeah, we just played a handful of shows together over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, but we just played with him up in Miles City, Montana for the bucking horse sale. So I just saw him a couple of days ago. But yeah, we know each other pretty well. He's one of my favorite songwriters there is. I mean, he's got such a unique way of looking at things. And yeah, he's just a neat guy to be around.
Ned, I want to talk to you a little bit about your your father's legacy here. But first, I want to let you know that I'm a big fan of your 2017 album, Sagebrush.
Well, thank you.
We're coming up on about 6 months since it released. How has the overall experience been for you?
It's been great. I mean, my dad's fans are some of the most loyal and dedicated fans around. And, the neat thing about them is, they might have become fans back in the early 80s, way before all the success that came later on. And so they'll be listening to dad's stuff then, and then they start having kids, and they introduce dad's stuff to their kids. And as it's just kind of passed down from generation to generation. And yeah, they've welcomed me with open arms. And yeah, I really appreciate that.
What's really incredible about Sagebrush is the uncanny likeness to your father's music. Was there any point during production in which you or anyone involved were just like, okay, this is almost too close. We have to do something to separate Ned's sound? Or on the other hand, was it more, this sounds like Chris LeDoux and we need to let that flow?
No, nothing like that ever came about. The songs that I wrote is like a perfect reflection of who I am. I was born and raised in Wyoming. I grew up on a ranch, and I'm a terrible pretender. So I can't be writing a song and singing a song about something I have no idea or relation to. So if it sounds like dad, then that's probably the best compliment I can get.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as the songs that I write, I got to stick to my guns. I got to write about what I know. So, but I did put a couple of dad's songs on there. Johnson County War, and then a song that he's probably most known for, this Cowboy's Hat.
Sure.
So, yeah, it was a great time, and Mac McAnally produced it, and he's become like a songwriting mentor for me, and his guidance in the studio was great, and yeah, he's just a neat guy.
Can you tell me a little bit more about writing with Mac McAnally, his process?
Well, the first song that I was ever a part of, writing, I guess the first song I ever wrote, it stemmed from an idea that Dad had. He left behind what I like to call the shoebox of thoughts, because we'll never know if he was ever going to go back through and try to finish these and turn them into a song. But my mom printed off, a few pages and sent them to me. And Mark Sissel, my guitar player, who also used to play with Dad and was a road manager, thought it would be a neat idea if I could try to finish one of these ideas. And so that's when Mac came into play. He found out that, Dad had left behind some of these ideas, and him and I just sat down together one day, probably about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, and we finished one. And it's a song called We Ain't Got It All. And we're pretty tickled with the way it turned out.
That's a great song. I want to ask you about one other particular song, The Hawk, which was your one solo write on the album. Can you tell me about the song, and was it important to you that this one was all you?
Oh, I guess, yeah. Well, I've heard this, it's like a legend about a song. When you're writing songs, every once in a while, one will just kind of write itself. And all you got to do is just keep up with it. And that's kind of the way The Hawk was, because it's a true story. And I just started writing it down, and it didn't take me long to finish it. I guess when you're writing the truth, then it comes out pretty easy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all a true story. That hawk, if you go out there to look for him, you're not going to see him. But when you least expect it, he'll show up and dip his wing and just to say hello.
I want to talk a little bit about your father's legacy here. I've read about your father's rodeo days, and I don't know a lot about rodeo myself, but with his winning the Wyoming State Championship rodeo in his high school days, attending Casper College on a rodeo scholarship, and going pro in the early 70s, followed by more championships. You were born in the late 70s, correct?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. This was just a few years before your father's retirement from rodeo, so you just missed the prime rodeo days, but what would come next would be pretty huge too. Do you have any memories of those last few years in rodeo, or the transition to focus on Chris LeDoux, the artist?
I just kind of have a blurry memory of Dad riding. But my mom told me this story, and I don't know how old I'd have been. Maybe I was pretty young, probably 3. I don't know, but it was at Cheyenne Frontier Days, and it was before they had the great big grandstand behind the bucking chutes. You know, they just had some smaller bleachers, and the bucking chutes are still made out of wood. But I guess Dad, you know, they turned him out, and you know, he made the ride, but he didn't get off on the pickup man. And my mom said that she looked down. I was sitting right next to her, but then she looked down after Dad's ride, and I was gone. And next thing she knew, she looked up in the arena, and I was out there in the arena dirt, just helping Dad up off the ground.
Awesome.
and I don't know how I weaseled my way through behind the chutes and into the arena, but they let me out. So I wish I could remember that, but yeah, I do just kind of have this blurry memory of Dad riding.
Throughout the 70s and the 80s, Chris LeDoux would self-release one or sometimes two full-length albums per year. This is just unheard of, even today when the technology is much easier to come across. No one's writing or recording at that speed. Looking back at your childhood, was your father writing every day, or what was his process like?
It didn't seem like he was writing every day. I mean, he was the kind of guy that, you know, he had a lot of irons in the fire, you know, with, you know, ranching, and, you know, he had just retired from rodeo, and, you know, just all kinds of things going on. And, you know, and I was looking back, you know, I was trying to pick out a song to cover of one of his, and I wanted to pick one that he wrote himself. And he did write a lot of songs, there's no doubt, but he also covered a lot of classics as well. But yeah, to go in and record 2 records a year, you know, that, you know, like you said, that's, you don't hear that anymore.
No.
But yeah, yeah, the songwriting, yeah, that's the only album that I remember he spent a lot of time writing a lot of songs was the Powder River album. And I think that was the album that came just before he got signed to Capitol Records.
As mentioned, the most astonishing thing about all of Chris LeDoux's early music was that it was done without support of any major labels.
Well, I guess in the early days, you know, in the 80s, you know, I think he would go around kind of knocking on doors and just to hope that they'd listen to his stuff. And nobody in Nashville really understood, you know, cowboy songs or songs about rodeo. And they're like, yeah, these are really good songs, but it's just not selling. You know, we don't know where to put you. But the thing about it was there's a great following. You know, he went back home to Wyoming, and, you know, the folks in rodeo understood it. You know, that's where the worn out tape of Chris LeDoux came around, you know. Right. And so then when Garth put his name in that song, that's when things, you know, people started wondering, well, who's Chris LeDoux? You know, as far as like the major labels and you know, kind of the big wigs, I guess. But yeah, that helped Dad out a lot. You know, he'd say it himself that, you know, it helped him out tremendously.
Being that you were 11 or 12 probably at the time, do you remember your father's reaction to being mentioned in Garth's song?
Yeah, I remember we were driving back from Casper, and he turned the radio on, which never really happened that much. But he said there was a song, you know, it's kind of mentioned in rodeo, and then worn out tape of Chris LeDoux, and he kind of swerved a little bit, like, what? Did they just say my name? So yeah, he was pretty tickled, you know, and I guess the rest is history, you know, and I think it kind of helped out both Garth and Dad, you know. It kind of introduced all the rodeo folks to Garth, and then it introduced all of Garth's, you know, millions of fans to Dad.
Right.
So, yeah, it was a great deal for both of them, I think.
Well, this, of course, would lead to quite a friendship between your father and Garth. Can you describe their relationship?
Oh, yeah, they were pretty close. You know, yeah, they would call each other up every now and then. Yeah, they were really good friends. They accomplished a lot of cool things together.
You recently were invited to open for Garth in Nashville. What was that experience like?
Well, one thing about it, we didn't have enough time to get nervous. Because we had just got back from Vegas playing the National Finals Rodeo, and I think we were home for a day and a half. And Mark Sissel, my guitar player and road manager, called me up and said, "Hey, what are you doing this Friday?" And I said, I don't know, probably going Christmas shopping or something." And because this was in December, and he said, "Well, Bob Doyle, you know Bob Doyle, right? Garth's manager." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, he was wondering if you'd want to come into Nashville and open up for Garth." I said, "Really?" And so I was like, "Well, I guess I better get on the internet, get me a flight booked." So yeah, that was a pretty exciting way to kind of close out the year.
Yeah, that's really cool. Throughout the 90s, Chris LeDoux has signed and released records through both Liberty Records and Capitol Nashville. This would include his more well-known singles like This Cowboy's Hat, What You Gonna Do with a Cowboy, Cadillac Ranch, $5 Fine. Now, did being connected to a record label change your father's outlook on his music, or did he just see it as a way for more people to hear his work?
Well, I'm not real sure. I know once he got a record deal, as far as the songs go, he had a lot of people pitching him stuff, and he was really picky. I mean, even though he didn't write a lot of stuff, later on in his career, there was just a handful of songs that he did write. But I guess that was kind of one nice thing about it. I remember him saying like, "Yeah, boy, I get to kind of go through all these songs and pick out what I want." And he was really particular on stuff. He had a pile of good ones, which was really small, and then a small pile of maybe, and then the rest of them was in the garbage can. But yeah, it just kind of made things a little easier, I guess, for him. That's a question you'd have to ask him himself,
Yeah.
But yeah.
I have to imagine that CDs being available in Walmarts across the country is quite a change from self-releasing and selling records out of his truck at the rodeo.
Yeah. I think before that it was like, they were at the, local, feed stores and,
Yeah.
and selling. For a long time the only way you could get them was at one of Dad's shows.
Your father's music was rarely on the radio up here in Ohio, to my memory, and I have to imagine, based on chart history, that this was pretty common around the country. But being that he had been so successful as an independent artist in the region for the better part of 2 decades prior to signing a label, did this bother him at all, or was he just happy to have more people hearing the music?
Well, I think not having it played on the radio for so long, and even, I mean, I think now they might play it a little bit more, but just not having that radio support, I guess, it was just kind of a steady climb. And I think if it would have just happened overnight for him, he probably wouldn't have appreciated it as much, just knowing that he put so much work into making it. He just really, just reaped the rewards of what he sowed.
Sure. I never had the opportunity to see Chris LeDoux perform live, but luckily the world has YouTube to allow those in the same position as myself to get a little taste. You eventually joined your father's band, Western Underground, as the drummer. Can you describe what a Chris LeDoux concert was like from your view?
It was crazy. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, and I remember, just kind of pinching myself, thinking, "Man, are you really doing this?" Because I was playing in bands around Wyoming for a number of years, before I joined Dad's band, and I just remember being on the tour bus with him and everybody from Western Underground, and I was like, "Man, I'm a part of this group now," But it was only like the second or third show in, and I didn't really feel like I was a staple member yet. I felt like I still had something to prove. Like, don't get too cocky here. He could send you back to the ranch any day. So I made sure to really work on being the best drummer I could be. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
All in all, Chris LeDoux released, at my count, 28 studio albums on top of numerous hits collections and a must-own live record, along with some really entertaining music videos, up to his passing in 2005 at the age of 56. Ned, can you share your opinion as far as what your father's legacy is as the country music and rodeo world knew him, and then as you, your siblings, and family and friends knew him and loved him?
Well, it still amazes me in only 56 years everything he was able to achieve and accomplish. I mean, I know most of the world knows him for being a world champion bareback rider and world-renowned singer-songwriter. And in my opinion, there still hasn't been anybody who put on a better show than he did. But some things that maybe a lot of people didn't know about was he was also a great sculptor and a really good carpenter. He built 2 log cabins, a barn, a number of different loafing sheds and corrals and stuff. But I remember him saying that above all of that stuff, he just wanted to be known as a good husband and a good father. And he was the best dad any kid could ask for.
That's cool. The 8th annual Chris LeDoux Days is coming up on June 16th. Tickets are available now at chrisledoux.com and nedledoux.com. If you are near or planning on traveling to the festival, avoid the lines. Get your tickets ahead of time. Be sure to get your copy of Ned's full-length debut album, Sagebrush, easily one of the best records of 2017. Ned, where can the Born Country listeners find you on social media?
Yeah, they can just go to nedledoux.com or, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff.
All right, those links will be available in the show notes for this episode at iwasborncountry.com. Ned, thank you so much for joining me on the show this week and sharing your father's stories. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we take this home?
Oh, yeah, just go out and get you a copy of Sagebrush. New single is Brother Highway. It just came out a few days ago. I'll be hitting the road promoting that for the rest of the year. So, just excited.
Very cool. All right, Ned, thanks again. Hopefully we'll catch you down the road soon.
All right. Have a good one.
All right, take care. Thanks again to Ned LeDoux for taking a few minutes out of his busy tour schedule this week to join us on the Born Country podcast. Make sure to check out nedledoux.com for tour dates and merchandise. Especially make sure to get a hold of his newest album, Sagebrush. If you love great country music about cowboys and western life, Sagebrush is a must-own. Once again, make sure to follow Born Country on Twitter and Instagram to get in on all of the CMA Fest action coming up next week between June 3rd and June 10th. Lots of country music going on down there, and I'll be there to capture it all for you. I will also be sporting some official Born Country podcast t-shirts, so if you're in town for CMA Fest, you see me bouncing around town, make sure to stop me and say hello. Thank you again to everyone for listening to the Born Country podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review or comment on iTunes, at iwasborncountry.com, on Facebook, wherever you're listening to the show, and please let me know what you think. Your feedback shapes this show, and I love hearing from you folks each week. I couldn't do it without you. We'll see you in probably 2 weeks with another interview. I'll have my equipment with me down in Nashville next week, so we may get a bonus episode up, but I'm not quite sure yet. Either way, you'll be hearing from me very soon. For iwasborncountry.com and the Born Country podcast, my name is Arthur Bourne, and I was born country. Take care.